to Shift, a podcast where we share stories of people overcoming their own internal BS to really come out of their comfort zones and grow in their personal and professional lives. My aim here is to help people recognize that there's a lot of undiscovered parts of ourselves that await us if we're just willing to get out of those comfort zones and get out our own way. My name is Elena Agragimova, your host, and today I'm joined by a powerful duo, Rana and Mazen. They're the co-founders of EduPloyment, a purpose-driven technology business to help eradicate poverty by educating and employing the underprivileged. Rana, Mazen, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us on the program.
I'm really super excited to chat with you guys. So before we jump into what EduPloyment does, which is so close to the hearts of myself and my business partner, and I'm sure so many people in the community, I want to talk a little bit about your individual journeys because you come from various backgrounds. And I'm really curious, how do you end up in the sector that you're in? Because Mazen, from your side, you have quite a vast experience coming from IT and then going into something completely different and coming back to IT, then going into a food and beverage business, right? And now education sector. And then Rana, from your side, you've also had quite a rich experience in healthcare, working in hospitals, and then you also kind of went into the F&B and then education sector. And you guys are both co-founders of the couple of entrepreneurial journeys. So just talk to me about, just briefly, how did that all come about? What inspired you to go into EduPloyment after all that?
You go first. Yours is shorter.
From the description, I feel like a little pinball in a pinball machine. But you're actually right. Everything you said was correct. I think I spent 20 years in the health sector. By profession, I have a doctorate in audiology, which is the science of hearing. So I spent many years caring for people's hearing that needed to be corrected, either with a device or... So basically, in the end, helping people overcome their challenges and so that they can have a better life. In the last 8 years of my career, I was head of a cochlear implant center, and cochlear implantation costs a lot of money. So although I was in the private sector, I also had to deal with a lot of fundraising and dealing with charities to help my patients get the funds for these surgeries. So I just really realized the impact of how when somebody can communicate properly and you give them access to communication, their lives can really improve for them and their families as well. I decided to shift careers and join Mazen full-time. We had a business together that was in F&B, and after 20 years of doing audiology, I wanted to actually join Mazen in the company that we had built together, and I wanted to do that full time. And so we started with F&B, but I have to say that I missed that part of being able to make a change in somebody's life. So I always looked for that, and Mazen knew I was suffering, and that was my agony. So providing employment for our staff, I also learned how that can have an impact on their lives, and so it grew from there. I'll let Mazen tell you how the story for EduPloyment came up.
It's very interesting. You asked this question, and I've been listening to Rana and reflecting on how to best to answer it, because my journey has been quite eclectic, maybe is the right word, right? It's in various things. But I think I'd characterize it in this way. There's probably, I would say, the earlier part, or let's say everything about 5 years ago, were mainly driven by targets of opportunity. Right? I would be lying if I said I sat there one day and said, "Oh, let me go work for a telecommunication company, distributing handsets or what have you." No, it was whatever was necessary for me to do at the time, either when I was single or as a family man, to whatever options were there. So, I started my first, tech startup when I was 18, while I was, doing one of my masters and all this stuff. And, that was an idea that came, and it was something that I wanted to act on with my co-founder at the time, and we did it, and because it was there. And then when we finally, eventually I met Rana and I got married, it was like, okay, well, this business is not making money. I need a paycheck to pay for my mortgage, right? And I actually signed the mortgage papers before I got a job offer, so I was on the hook. So I had to accept the first job that came in. And that job led me down a path of, being a database programmer at the National Institutes of Health, supporting, AIDS and cancer research, and working my way up the corporate chain, all the way back down to here. So I would say that a lot of it has been driven by opportunities, forks in the road that come in, you make the best choice, and then you make the best of that choice.
Are you saying I married someone who had no vision?
I had a vision at the time of becoming a multi-billionaire or something silly like that.
It's too late now, Rana.
But I think it's
things you learn, you find out.
I think the interesting part is the transformation that I went through over the last 5 years, where I would say it becomes it has more to do with the power of intention. So I recall being on a very special retreat about 4 or 5 years ago, and reflecting in terms of saying, so what do I want to do? We were in the F&B business, which became, again, by necessity. I was working for a big corporate company, multi-billion-dollar business, very successful executive, and that collapsed with the economic crisis, and basically became an entrepreneur by necessity because nobody was hiring. It's a long story, but that's what happened. With the last phase, it was actually sitting there and saying, what is it that I want to do with my life? Where do I want to be, in 3 years and 5 years? And I recall sitting, writing down in a journal, and I don't journal, so I'm not one of these kind of, very soft touchy.
I do, by the way.
She does, okay. But I remember sitting there and saying, okay, by the time I am, 55 years old, I want to have a business that has X amount in revenue, okay, Y amount in profit. I want a business in tech. I want a business in tech that is more of like a SaaS model, software as a service model, right? And I just put down these parameters, right? And it's, call it the manifestation, call it intention, whatever, word you want to apply to it. But I firmly believe having set that intention about 4 or 5 years ago helped me not only get inspired by, but act upon the idea of EduPloyment about a year and 4 months ago. If I had not set that intention, I would not have been tuned in to that idea and the possibility. And then it became, as I shared it with a couple of very close friends, one of them explicitly said to me, Mazen, this is not a business idea. This is a calling. You have to do this. You cannot have an idea like this and not act upon it. So those friends, that friend's words meant a lot to me. And it really helped me say, what, we're going to try to make this happen. And that's how we came into this. Long answer to your question.
I love it. I love the intention part. I love it that both of you kind of come from that background as well of just trying to make a difference in some way. And it was almost like natural progression of things. And although, up until you maybe set that intention, you weren't really sure where it's going to end up. And you were just, in your case, Mazen, you were kind of just doing things because you had to. And I think that's so real because a lot of times with entrepreneurship, what we hear, right, is like, well, I had this vision and I really knew I had to do this, but sometimes you just do what you have to do, and then you end up in this situation, right? And Rana, you come from a background where you were, from that sort of, healthcare and just trying to help people lead more quality lives at the end of the day, and that is. And so and the baby of that essentially is EduPloyment, all of those experiences. And so now what you guys are doing with EduPloyment is you're helping underprivileged a working population gain English skills so that they're able to have good jobs and kind of be able to provide for their families. And in places like the Middle East, a lot of times, of course, it's an expat community, right? And we all know what it feels like being expats in the UAE. So having to kind of send money back home, perhaps. So what is how do you foresee that EduPloyment is going to transform essentially, what is the impact that you're looking to make with EduPloyment? Because I can foresee there's so many benefits, but I'm curious, what is the aim here?
So one of our main goals with EduPloyment was creating a mindset, creating a community where both the employers actually have that intention, an intention that is clear of providing decent work, fair pay, a safe environment to work in. So you can go to many other recruitment companies and find people who need jobs. But the intention mainly is to create an environment and a community where you're conscious and aware of the good that you want to do in the world. And the same thing on the candidate side is somebody looking for a job, not just to make the money, but to also upskill themselves, improve themselves and their families. So in their education, we start with the English training, but the hope is to go far beyond that.
100%. I think, to summarize it, we want to create a community of employers and candidates that are committed to decent work, right? Whereby they're, as an employer, they're treating their people fairly, they're providing them fair pay, safe working environment, timely pay, supporting their upskilling and their continued upskilling. That to us is what a decent work environment is.
We try to do that in subtle ways as well. So, for example, on the app itself, we have a little it's like a little post that comes up while you're doing your registration, and it's actually a pledge. So it's a little cartoon of somebody with their hand raising their hand and pledging to commit to upskilling themselves and supporting their families and committing to being a decent employee. And the same thing on the employer side as well. So it's not a contractual agreement. It's just setting that mindset in a more of a subtle way.
Mm.
Well, that's what that's the basis of the impact that we're trying to have. And then there's multiple amplifiers that we've kind of added on to the business model. So it's all about the give back and paying it forward, right? So simple things like we take the fees that we charge to the employers, the placement fees, those we pass back to the specific candidate that they've hired, and we're very adamant about that, as we wanted the benefit to be tied to that individual that they hired, not some anonymous other person, where that person can then turn around and share 5 EduPloyment memberships with their friends and family to help uplift them with English and a better job, if they're so interested. And that, and doing a scholarship, for the candidates where they can come back if they've been employed through us and apply for it, and that gives them the opportunity to have one of their children's college tuition paid for fully for the 4-year program. And that's a way to kind of break into the poverty into the next generation. So again, the core is that decent work and matching these blue-collar workers with the employers, and we believe just by creating that environment, that will have a very positive social impact on these individuals, both the employers and the candidates, as well as these other ones.
Mm. And I love that piece about mindset, because I think that on its own and just that pledge is so powerful, because oftentimes we don't know what we don't know. And the biggest obstacle for people, especially, if you haven't had exposure, if you haven't had certain opportunities, is the belief and this, hope that actually there's something better. So if we are able to see this in our mind that hey, I can do this and there's support and I can afford it and it's accessible to somebody like me, then you're then able to dream a little bit bigger, and then your intention changes with time, right? So Mazen, it's like that ripple effect. And then
it opens up new possibilities.
Absolutely.
Possibilities for you, right?
And then it opens up possibilities to their family members as well.
100%. And now you're and when that person sets that intent, and by the way, intent is one of these terms now that's very much into that kind of, it's a trending thing, because of mindfulness and different types of disciplines, but it's ancient, right? It exists in all major religions, right? In Islam, it's Niyya, right? Yeah. It literally means intent, right? And so it's been around. Now it's popularized. It's fantastic, right? But there is, as human beings, when we have that intent, it kind of sets a directionality for us, and it helps us sometimes even subconsciously make better decisions that guide us towards achieving that objective. And when that candidate does that, it also helps set that intention for their children and their family members, and that it's not just them, it's all of their dependents, and that's for us very critical, because we know based on our research that on average each of these individuals has 7 financial dependents, between parents and siblings and wives and children that they are supporting, right? And so when you help upskill that one person and you help change their mindset, okay, then that'll have a ripple effect on the rest of them.
Absolutely. Changing the world one person at a time. Goosebumps. Love it.
Inshallah.
Love it. So I imagine that this is also quite new for some companies that you guys are working with. So there's been, the social responsibility, and companies do, quite well with the CSR, or in some cases, sometimes it's just throwing money at some charities in their case, right? So I'm curious, what has been the response from companies that you guys have been partnering up with on this?
Great question. It's interesting. We're just getting ready to launch our outreach to employers as we're starting. We've already launched on the candidate side with great success. In our, let's say, kind of focus groups and discussions with employers, the response has been tremendous. And it's funny and maybe ironic that you mentioned CSR and that approach. Ironically, we're not approaching employers from that perspective. So we are a for-profit, purpose-driven business, right? So we're not coming in saying, we are a CSR activity. However, what is interesting in our value proposition is we're saying, continue doing business as normal. We're not asking you to give us money out of your CSR budget or your marketing budget or your philanthropy or your foundation. We're saying out of your recruiting costs. It's business as usual. You're paying other recruiters, you're paying other agencies. Use us in addition to or in place of. In exchange, we're going to cost you 80% less, eliminate all your travel, give you better candidates, everything online, etc. And you get to have a tangible social impact. So unlike the CSR activity that they might be doing where they write a check and it goes to some charity, which is great and that needs to continue, they might not know what is that direct tangible impact they had. How many families did they actually feed, right? Mm-hmm. They don't know that. But with EduPloyment, they actually have a choice. So when they go to post their job, they can choose to pay at what we call the lifter, uplifter, or power uplifter level.
I love the terms.
Yeah. So those three levels basically translate into how many people do you want to uplift with your placement fee? Is it 5, 7, or 10? Okay, and even at the 10, which is the highest level that we have, it is still roughly 50% less than what our competitors would charge.
So you're hiring the one person for that job. But if you pay a little bit extra, that means that person you hired gets more coupons to share with their family and friends, subscriptions to share with their family.
And that's where, they have a tangible impact. They can actually, in a sense, vote with their dollars, and say, no, we want to help more people. We're really committed to CSR as a company. Great. Pay a little bit extra. You're still saving 50% of what you're going to pay. Pay a little bit extra, help more people. And so the response has been very positive. The only issue is they want it now, and so we're trying to work as hard as we can to get everything ready.
Yeah, that's amazing. Listen, I just have a couple more questions for you guys, and I'm curious because it sounds like such an interesting journey from previous experience that you guys have had, similar yet different. But I'm curious from this particular experience, what have you learned about yourselves?
I don't know.
For me, I'm being very conscious and aware of it, especially now in Ramadan. I've learned that I'm very brave. I mean, for somebody to do this and to go through these different journeys, it takes a lot of guts. So I Alhamdulillah, I'm a very brave person, and I'm a learner. And which is the essence of all of this. I realize that I love learning, and my education and learning has got me to the place that I'm at. And I want everybody to have access to that, or just to know that. It's not a big secret. It's so simple.
Yeah, I would have to echo that. I think my biggest learning is that, reaffirmation of my infinite appetite for learning, and reconnecting with, the tech world, being a tech entrepreneur again, after a little bit of a break when, doing F&B has been phenomenal because obviously there's so much to learn and tech is so exciting and there's so much happening. But, it's, learning as you see now is what echoes between us. And that's actually the foundation of EduPloyment is when we decided, it was all about saying, if we can figure out what our true purpose as a couple, and it's something that comes from within us. It's not contrived and not something that we're adopting, but it's something of who we are. Then we believe we would be unstoppable in terms of what we can accomplish, and that's being proven out in this journey so far.
That's great. And before I ask my last question, I'm just curious, where can people find you? Where can they learn, where they can contribute? If they're a company or maybe they know somebody who might benefit from the platform on an individual level, where can they connect?
Fantastic. Thank you for the opportunity. So www.eduployment.com. So EduPloyment. So it's a combination of education and employment. EduPloyment.com. You'll find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Happy to connect with anybody anytime.
Great, and I'll share the details, absolutely. And the final question: if you had a magic wand to kind of fulfill this mission that you're on, what would you like to see happen in EduPloyment space in the next 12 months, let's say?
12 months.
Or 2 years, whatever you want to. Just in the coming near future.
No, we know exactly where what that magic wand is going to deliver. That in 3 years, inshallah, will look like 7.6 million people that we have helped to uplift. Okay, between candidates, and so we know that we have that vision, we have that very concrete. I think the magic wand that we need right now is obviously on the, as a startup, you always need more funding.
Yeah. I'd love not to need the funding. That would be nice.
No, I think I'd like to put it this way. What we would like to achieve is have EduPloyment become the fair or decent work hiring standard, right? So just like people now talk about fair trade, etc. This is a movement. This is a cause that we want to build out there to provide decent work for people. Nothing more, nothing less. It's a basic human right. It's not a major issue. But if we get people to adopt that and identify that with EduPloyment as being on the forefront of establishing that, then I think that's what I would love to do with that magic wand.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for being with us and just having this conversation. And I really admire what you guys are doing. I think we're going to see a lot of success, inshallah, coming from your side. And really wish you all the best. And it's goosebumps. Your mission gives me goosebumps, really. So thank you. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you for the opportunity of being on the program. It's been great. Fantastic questions. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.